Hi, everybody. I'd like to thank you for coming to the Second Amendment rally and informational meeting. I'm really far away. I had planned to be there, but my schedule didn't allow it. So I'm coming to you by video, and that's the only medium I could use. I'm sending this from a hotel room, and yes, I know the pictures on the wall behind me are crooked. Tried to straighten them, but it didn't work out. Anyway, please pay good attention to the speakers tonight. They're all good men and they know what they're talking about. What I find is there's a disturbing trend in government these days, and that is the supremacy of government over God's law and the supremacy of government over the founders of this nation who instituted the Bill of Rights in order to guarantee freedom from government interference over rights that we already have. I know that Judge Mueller in court made the statement that she doesn't deal in God-given rights, she only deals in constitutional rights. But when you read the Constitution does not bestow rights on the people. It simply guarantees the people's rights are free from government interference. And that's the fight we're in, because the modern era and the progressive era, the way children are educated, we're all taught to believe that rights come from government, and anything that government gives, remember, government can take away. So if you believe that rights are derived from government, then please prepare yourself, because what they give, they can also take away. And Thomas Jefferson said, any government big enough to give you everything you want is also big enough to take it away from you. So we are here to ask some questions today, and I'd like you to ask these questions of yourself, of your neighbors, of the people on the stage. You can ask them of me. If you want my email address or my phone number, just ask one of the speakers, or Terry or Sally, and they'd be happy to give it to you. I'm not close by right now, but I should be back around the end of the month or beginning of next month. So my first question is, what is the job of government? What is the proper role of government? Is there any line to that role? In other words, is government all-encompassing? Is there nothing that they're not free to delve into should they so choose to? Is there a place where government doesn't belong in your life and your liberty and your rights and the way you conduct yourselves, so the way you raise your children, the way you educate your children? Are there places where government has no part? Or, in the modern view, is government allowed to do anything they want to, and all they have to do is instruct you as to how you're to behave when they're doing it? That's a really important question. It's a question we better ask. In my view, government has one job, and one job only, and that is to defend the liberties of the people, defend those liberties from all comers. In other words, any outside influence that would deprive you of your liberty, that requires a voice greater than our locally collective voice, that's where government steps in to defend us from attacks from within and without that would take our liberty from us. That is their only role. Anything else they do is usurped, and its power gained along the way without consent and without the proper constitutional authority. What is the job of that government? What's the job of the court? Where can courts go? Where do they belong? What are courts designed to do? What are they supposed to do? Article 3 of the Constitution spells that out very clearly. Courts have jurisdiction over equity and law in all matters under the Constitution. They have no extra constitutional authority. Article 3 never gave that to them. They gave that power to themselves. And I want to illustrate that point. When our attorney in the Second Amendment case was asked by the judge, said, well, you keep referring to God-given rights and pre-governmental rights. And the judge said, I just want you to know, I don't deal with those. I deal with constitutional rights, as though rights were granted to us by the Constitution, and we were born to serve the government, and if the government chooses to give you certain things, then they will, and if they don't choose to give you other things, then they won't, and it's just too bad for you if they do or they don't. And to what degree they do, and to what degree they change their mind later, and what form the conversation takes when they decide to change their mind later. For example, California. Let's take the quote assault weapon. Assault weapons were defined by the courts in Miller versus United States as fully automatic weapons. In other words, machine guns. They've been regulated for years and years and years. The Supreme Court blessed that. I don't agree with that decision. I think it's unconstitutional, but that's the world we live in today. But now California courts continue to move that goalpost. First, it was guns that were center fire, semi-automatic, magazine fed. Then it was if they had a adjustable stock. Then if they have a foregrip. Then if they have a barrel shroud. Then if they have a muzzle device, a flash hider. Then it was semi-automatic center fire guns with removable magazines and one of the other things. I mean, that goalpost is going to keep moving until finally all long guns are banned, and they can do that because no one stops them. You know, we're not stopping them, certainly with our vote. We could, but we're not. So what is the job of the court? In my view, the court is to provide consistency and clarity in the law. In other words, the law is consistent from one man to the next, from one jurisdiction to the next, from one state to the next. If you're talking about federal court, and that's what we're talking about today, state courts are a horse of a different color. They're totally political. The judge knows who pays them. They're paid by the state and they fine for the state almost exclusively. It's very rare that a state court won't fine for the state. That's corruption at its most basic level, but that's the world we live in. And once again, we have the power, because we are the people and we have all the power, to stop that anytime we want. We just don't. People can't be bothered to vote. They can't be bothered to show up. And so we have gotten the government that we allowed. But nevertheless, we're here for a different purpose. So where do your rights come from? In my view, your rights come from God Almighty. You were created in His image, and He is the freest expression in the universe. God can do anything. No one can stop Him. No one tells God what to do. No one could tell God what to do even if they wanted to. And you were created in His image, and that bestows upon you, just by its very nature, certain freedoms. Freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom to assemble, freedom to petition the government for redress of grievance. That's in the First Amendment. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's in the Second Amendment. The Fourth Amendment, freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures, freedom to due process, freedom to be confronted by your accusers, freedom to a public and speedy trial, freedom to a jury trial. Those are rights that were given you because you were born a human being. You didn't earn those because the United States government said, oh, by the way, we're going to allow these things until we choose not to. You had those rights. That's why we fought to institute this government. That's why we overthrew the king. Because the king was trying to take the place of God and take the place of the living God's bestowal upon us of certain liberties and certain rights. And the people of this nation in 1775 said no. And we fought for years and years and years, and thousands of lives were lost, and blood and treasure was spent, and people were bankrupt and run out of their houses and lost their families and their children in order to institute a form of government that guarantees the rights of the governed. And it guarantees those rights in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights in our system of government, and with all the logic that we hold dear as one of the greatest nations on the face of the earth, the only constitutional republic on earth. But we've come to a different place now. We've come to a place where progressivism is considered cool and hip, and young people think that government is better suited to tell them how to live than they are, and we've allowed all of this. So once again, I don't want to deal from a wishful position, because this is the shape we're in now, and we have to deal from the reality of that. So as you listen to the speakers today, decide for yourselves, what is the proper role of government? What kind of government will you allow in your life? What kind of government should we, the people of Jefferson, allow in our lives? Because we have the power to stop anything else. We've always had that power. If conservative Christians and gun owners would simply go and vote, we could take this state back in one election. If we could convince half of the declined states, the people who have no party preference, I'm one of them. If we could convince half of those people in this state just to vote, we could take back this state in one election. But we don't do it, and there's a reason for that. And I want you to think to yourself, what is that reason? How can we overcome that? Do people show up? Of course they do. You're in the room today. We have hundreds of supporters, maybe thousands, maybe tens of thousands. But what we need hundreds of thousands of people to go and show up and vote for the liberty that their God has given them, and that the progressive state and the progressive United States would like to take away from them. And we need support when we go to court. CFR has a hearing on the 6th of March in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. We're running out of money. I mean, we can win these things maybe if we can pay the attorneys. But if we can't pay the attorneys, then the case is going to stop, and that'll just be the end of that. And believe me, the people who are working on this, working very hard, we can't afford to finance this all by ourselves. We're trying, but we need more help. So again, back to the Second Amendment. I want you to think about what the proper role of government is. What is the Bill of Rights? What does the Bill of Rights mean to you? How did we come to the Bill of Rights? Yes, it was a kind of an argument between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The Anti-Federalists were never in opposition to the Constitution of the United States. They just didn't think it supplied enough guarantees on the rights of the people. California Constitution has a Declaration of Rights, but the state doesn't abide by it. So what good is that declaration when courts deny it, when governments deny it, when politicians claim not even to know what's in it? You can ask your candidates when they come to candidate night, what is the Fourth Amendment? What's the Fifth Amendment? What's the Second Amendment? What does it mean to them? What is their role in that? In other words, if they're progressive, if they're anti-gun, if they're anti-this or anti-that, do they have the power to ignore the Bill of Rights in spite of their personal feelings? The answer to that is no. That is the bedrock upon which our Constitution is laid. The rights of the people are inviolate. The rights of the people are God-given. No government has the power to alter those rights, deny those rights, or change them without going through the amendment process. The founders put a process in the Constitution. If you like guns, you know what to do about it. Get rid of the Second Amendment. But there are hurdles you have to jump through to do that. Well, no one's willing to do them. So they just vote for stuff, and that stuff becomes law, and we're powerless to stop them because we don't have millions of dollars to hire lawyers. But we need to find a way to stop that. We need to find a way to change that behavior. And one of the best ways to do that is start educating children in what liberty means. Now, that's an uphill battle in California because the California Teachers Union owns this state. State employees unions own this state. They own you because they own your money. And they will continue to educate children in a progressive way and in the way of socialism and eventually communism unless you and I stop them. But even in the near term, start showing up to your Board of Education. See what they're teaching your kids. Find out whether drag queens are reading stories to your children during story hour. Find out if gay and lesbian lifestyle and abortion is being taught to your grammar school kids. Find that out. Do something about it, in other words. So what is the Bill of Rights? Well, rights were not conferred by government. They're protected from government. That's what the Bill of Rights means. So why is it that courts are always talking about, and I find myself falling into this trap, the core right of the Second Amendment. I've said that to myself, and one day I was thinking about it, and I said, well, the core right is the right shall not be infringed. It doesn't have anything to do with whether I stuff the gun in my pants or put it on a holster outside my belt. My right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's pretty clear. It's clear to everybody but the people who rule over us anyway. It's probably clear to most of you for sure. You wouldn't be here today. But the government is denying that. And the question is, what do we do about it? What can we do? And I don't mean just what can we do. I mean, how can we succeed? Because if we don't gain these rights, if we don't regain the liberty that we've squandered willingly through our inaction, our inattention, our non-participation, whatever you want to call it, if we don't regain that liberty, then they won. And they can do anything to you they want to, and believe me, they will. More is coming every single day out of Governor Newsom and his legislature. More tyranny, more taxes, more usurpation of your life, your liberty, until finally people are fleeing the state. But where are you going to go? Because with all of the people fleeing California because poop in the road in San Francisco and all of the overabundance of taxes, people who have money can move. And they're dragging their liberal politics with them. If you're going to run to Idaho, think about it, because in 15 years, Idaho will be progressive. If we don't stop this here, if we don't stop it now, ourselves in our own homes, why do you think it's going to stop in other places? So I say fight here and fight now. But the Bill of Rights were not conferred. They were protected from government interference. Why should we, as citizens, demand that the Second Amendment remain above government's policy table? Why should we? Well, the reason for that is simple. I mean, it's a horrible reason. It's a reason no one wants to look at, but it is the truth. in the mid 1750s, because of the Intolerable Acts and because the British king was subjugating his own people and literally murdering his own people and stealing their property and putting them in chains and throwing them on ships and sending them back to England to be tried in a place thousands of miles away from where the alleged crime was committed and away from local representation and away from juries who were their peers, and instead by juries who didn't even know who they were or what their motivations were, we decided to stop that. And it was only with the gun that we were able to do that. Do you think, had we just stood up in the square in Lexington Green on April 19, 1775 and kind of waved cardboard signs, whether Pitcairn and his men would have turned around and gone back to Boston? I don't think so. I think that it was the gun that caused this nation to be created, and we had to take our liberty away from a king who was in the business of keeping it for himself. And so the Second Amendment was not designed so that you could go hunt rabbits. It was not designed so you could target shoot. Those things are great. I do those things myself. But that's not the purpose of the Second Amendment. The purpose of the Second Amendment is to defend ourselves against a potentially tyrannical government and put them on notice that we will not give up our liberty without a fight. And then there is a secondary intent of the Second Amendment, and that is the human, God-given right, the right every creature is born with to defend themselves. I mean, every creature on earth has some mechanism to defend himself, literally, except for human beings. I mean, we can make a fist, but we don't have big nails or big teeth. We can't run 40 miles an hour. We don't weigh 500 pounds. I mean, we're not fast. We're not able to defend ourselves through natural means. Human beings require tools to defend themselves. In the old days, it was a club or a stick or a rock or a sling or a bow and arrow, and now it's a firearm. And our ability to defend ourselves has to match the ability of those who would take our lives and property from us. And if you have the Crips and the Bloods or even the government or whoever it is, and they have semi-automatic center fire pistols and rifles, then you need the same thing to defend yourself, or your wife does when you're not home. And we're rife with examples. Where we've had the need to do that. So we must demand that those rights be preserved, or else we have no defense for ourselves, at least nothing that could equal what our adversaries will use to deprive us of our lives, our liberty, and our property. So really, we're getting to the point where we have to ask ourselves, yeah, we have these rights, but who cares? I mean, if effectively you're banned from them, do you really care about them? I mean, what's the difference? People in the city don't care. I was talking to one of my progressive buddies down at breakfast this morning on our way to work, and he's going, gun, schmun, who needs it? I don't need that. I ride snowboards, and I drive my Tesla, and I race cars on weekends, or I do this or that. I don't care about guns. Who needs one? The government's never going to come and get you. I mean, and I'm sure that's what the people of Venezuela thought in 2012 when they willingly gave up their firearms to Hugo Chavez. I mean, they willingly did it. And I remember reading accounts of it. And they were saying, oh, well, people in cities don't need guns. Maybe people on the farm do because they need to shoot a pig once in a while or a wildcat or something. But we don't. We live in a city. It's cosmopolitan. Nobody ever wants to hurt you here. And now they're being tyrannized to the point of starvation and death, and they have no means to defend themselves. And I just want to say this to you. I have been all over the world. And if you think it can't happen here, you're stupid. And that's the only explanation I have. It can happen anywhere. It has happened in many, many countries. If you think we are immune to a tyrannical government, you're stupid. And you deserve whatever happens to you. So I want you to just consider that as well. And I want to ask you some other questions. Is it more important for government to trust you or for you to trust government? Do you trust a government that doesn't trust you? Do you trust a government that doesn't trust you with the same tools that they have? Do you trust a government when the government has more ability to defend itself from you than you have of defending yourselves from government? And I think it was Joe Biden the other day, old crazy Joe. He said, well, if you think you're going to stand up to the government, you're going to need an F-15 and a Hellfire missile. Well, yes, we don't have those things. But in the old days, it was legal to have them. If they were built, it was legal to own a pirate ship with cannons on it. John Sutter owned 50 cannons. He had 100 armed men in his employ. They were literally the largest arm in California militarily. The Mexican government knew about them, but they were powerless to do anything because their arms and weapons equaled that of the government. That's the situation we need to find ourselves in. It is legal to own a jet fighter, by the way. You can't own first-line fighters, according to the government, but you can own stuff that the military currently isn't using, like, I don't know, F-5, stuff like that. But anyway, do you trust a government that entitles itself to things that it would deny you because they don't trust you with those same implements? Who formed government? Did government form society, or did society form government? Where on earth do they get off sitting in judgment of you and what you want and what you need? How do they know your lives? How do they know what you'll need to defend yourself from oppression or tyranny or a robber or a home breaker or whatever it is? And the answer to that is they don't. Here in California, are you really prepared to accept the most repressive, least free state in the nation telling you what you can or can't have? Are you okay with that? If you are, just leave the room now. And if you're not, make up your mind when you leave the room that you are going to help us do something about that. And you can help us in many ways. We have a court case, Baird versus Becerra, going right now, and the judge has been sitting on that. You know, that case was filed a year ago in March. Almost 1 year ago, that case was filed. They delayed the first hearing until, I think it was October 10th or something like that, October, November the 10th, one or the other. We were waiting for a ruling on the motion to dismiss. We haven't had a ruling on a simple motion to dismiss or preliminary injunction in the ensuing 4 months. 4 months, Judge Mueller has just been sitting on that, doing nothing. Now, we think she's waiting for the disposition of the New York Rifle and Pistol Association case because it might have some bearing on this case. Whether you can travel with your firearm, whether the Constitution granted you the right to pick up a piece of property that you lawfully purchased and lawfully use, and it is owned lawfully, and it's not against the law to have this particular piece of property, and to determine whether you are allowed to travel with a piece of your property. Now, whether that's a gun or a whisk broom, it doesn't matter. It's your property. Lawfully acquired. You're a lawful citizen with lawfully acquired property, but the government says you can't travel that property. Well, that's the same with your pistol. If you put your pistol in a holster outside your belt, you can't leave your front door in the state of California lawfully with that pistol, much less walk to the mailbox. Unless you have a fence completely around your house and your mailbox, you can't leave your front door or your business with your property to walk down to the mailbox and get your mail, much less defend yourself or go in the store or do anything else you want. That's illegal in California. So in California, you have a right to keep arms of certain types as long as the government agrees, and as long as you jump through the hoops and pay the money and register and so on, take your test and have your ID card and all this other stuff, you can bear arms, or you can keep arms, but you can't bear them. In order to carry weapons in the state of California, you need government permission, or you can't do it. You'll go to jail. Somebody argued with me about that, and I said, well, show me one place in California where just anybody who has never committed a crime can just put on their gun and go anywhere they want. There is no such place. In counties of less than 200,000, that's prohibited by PC 25850. In counties with less than 200,000, it's allowed by 26, 150, and 155. However, you still have to have permission, and no sheriff's ever given permission. So in a sense, it's banned there too. You have the right to keep arms, but you don't have the right to carry them. You can get permission to carry them. Well, not everyone. Some people can get permission, but not everyone. Are you one of those people? That's the open question. Are you? And the answer to that is, in most counties, probably no, because most counties have never issued concealed carry permits, or issue so few of them that they're literally worthless. So we come to the point where how much are you willing to pay for your liberty? Because those costs are going up too, and the qualification course is going up, and some people with older eyes maybe can't pass that class, so they then don't have the right to defend themselves. California is 48 out of 50 in least free states, 48 out of 50. So I just want to know, are you okay with squandering your children's liberty? Is that okay with you? And if it's not, please help us do something about it. That's basically all I have to say. It's just how important is your liberty to you? And it's an open question. My liberty is most important to me, and I do something about it every day. I put my money where my mouth is, my time, my life. I put all of that on the line because my liberty is worth everything to me. Because without liberty, I'd rather be dead. I don't want to live a slave, and I won't. So if you're okay being chained to your master's table and content with the scraps that he flicks on the floor for you and your family, then okay, you're probably in the wrong meeting. If you're not, please pay attention, learn something, add to the conversation, help us. Thank you very much, and God bless each and every one of you.